Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics with Ramin. In today's video, I would like to talk about the history of the Iranian army. So stay tuned, and we're gonna go through it. Iran's military prowess has been a subject of global interest and strategic concern, as the nation has steadily developed a robust military apparatus with significant regional and international implications. This multifaceted landscape involves not only the Iranian armed forces, but also an intricate web of alliances, partnerships, and a burgeoning military industrial complex. As we delve into the dynamics of Iran's military, this exploration will illuminate the key players, regional alliances, and the evolving capabilities of its military industrial sector. Understanding Iran's military posture provides crucial insights into the geopolitical chessboard, shaping regional stability and influencing global security paradigms. In this examination, we aim to unravel the intricate layers of Iran's military strategy, its allies, and the complex interplay with its military industrial complex, offering a comprehensive view of one of the most consequential military forces in the Middle East. By 1978, the Iranian army stood as the largest military force in the Middle East, surpassing even Egypt, a nation with a far larger population. This was a remarkable achievement considering the region's complex dynamics and global power struggles at the time. Iran had not only outpaced its neighbors, but also eclipsed many of its Western allies in terms of equipment, quantity, and sophistication. The crown jewel of this arsenal, the state of the art F 14 Tomcat fighter jet, an advanced aircraft that only the United States possessed. This acquisition symbolized Iran's leap into the realm of high tech military capabilities. The Iranian military's ambition didn't stop there. It played a key role in funding the development of Britain's Challenger tank, which featured the groundbreaking Chobham armor and innovation that revolutionized armored warfare. Alongside these contributions, Iran boasted a diverse and sophisticated array of ground, air, and naval systems, ensuring it was well prepared for any conflict. But Iran's military power wasn't just about hardware. The armed forces gained crucial battlefield experience by conducting counterinsurgency operations against rebels in Oman and contributing the troops to a United Nations peacekeeping mission in Lebanon. These missions enhanced the tactical readiness and international reputation. For Mohammad Reza Shah, this military buildup was deeply personal. After decades of humiliation at the hands of the Russian and British empires, the Shah was determined to reestablish Iran's military might. His vision was rooted in national pride and a desire to restore Iran's historic legacy. He often drew comparisons between his armed forces and the ancient Persian Achaemenid Empire, which had established the world's first superpower 2,500 years earlier. The Shah saw his modern military as a continuation of this glorious heritage, positioning Iran as a dominant force on the global stage. By 1978, Iran wasn't just a regional power, it was a military powerhouse. A combination of cutting-edge technology, strategic alliances, and battlefield experience placed it at the forefront of the Middle East. But this rise was much about reclaiming Iran's past as it was about securing its future. The American support for Iran's military seemed like a solid investment in stability and power. For years, the United States had poured resources and training into building one of the most advanced armed forces in the Middle East, but by January 1979, that investment came crashing down. As the streets of Iran filled with massive protests against the monarchy, the military, the very institution that had been bolstered by Western support, refused to act. Despite its strength and sophistication, the Iranian armed forces stood down, declining to suppress the widespread uprising. Amid this turmoil, the Shah, who had once envisioned his military as an unstoppable force, abandoned it. Even his elite unit, the Immortals, was left behind as he fled the country for good. With his departure, the once powerful Iranian military crumbled, leaving a power vacuum. This collapse paved the way for Ayatollah Khomeini to seize control. In a dramatic shift, Iran transformed from a pro-Western monarchy into an Islamic republic that was opposed to Western influence. It was a complete reversal of the Shah's vision and a turning point in the nation's history. The formation of the Islamic Republic marked the beginning of a new era, one defined by ties, the resistance movements across Western Asia, and a firm stance against Western domination. For future American administrations, this shift become a persistent source of tension and geopolitical challenges. The collapse of the Iranian military in 1979 wasn't just the end of an era, it was the start of a new geopolitical reality, one that would reshape the Middle East and reverberate across the globe. Following the First World War, Iran's military was divided into two distinct factions. On one side were the pro-monarchy Persian Cossacks, an elite force loyal only to the Shah and free from accountability to the Iranian people or their government. On the other side stood the Nationalist Gendarmerie, a force aligned with pro-democratic reformists. The Gendarmerie earned its reputation by battling Russian and British troops during the war, standing as a symbol of resistance and national pride. This division reflected Iran's broader struggle between foreign influence and national sovereignty. Both the Russian and British armies had left their mark on Iran's military, shaping its structure with both positive and negative aspects. However, over time, the Persian Cossacks, led by a rising officer named Reza Shah, gained dominance, paving the way for him to become Iran's future monarch. The unification of these two forces, while averting the risk of a split military, came at a cost. Professionalism, sensible budgeting, effective procurement, and even the welfare of soldiers were sacrificed in the process. Still, this unification was a significant step toward building a national military. As fear of the Bolshevik Revolution swept through the region, Iran was pressured into signing the Anglo-Persian Treaty in August 1919, effectively turning the country into a British protectorate. By 1920, Iran's military numbered 25,000 troops and relied heavily on British financial support. Among these, a third belonged to the Persian Cossack Division, commanded by 56 anti-communist White Russian officers who had acquired surplus weapons from departing Russian forces. The Nationalist Gendarmerie, meanwhile, remained loyal to the government despite being reduced to just 2 regiments stationed in Tehran after the war. Over time, it grew rapidly, eventually fielding nearly 10,000 officers and soldiers by 1921, organized into 14 regiments and independent battalions. This growth was fueled by captured Turkish rifles provided by the British, who sought stability despite the Gendarmerie's strong anti-British sentiment. The final third of Iran's military consisted of the South Persia Rifles and a regular army unit known as the Central Brigade. This brigade was severely weakened with only 2,200 officers and soldiers on its rolls, many of whom were absent from their barracks. Despite their differences, the Gendarmerie enjoyed high prestige among Iranians, primarily because of their nationalist stance and reliance on volunteers. Their officers, promoted from within or commissioned through re-established officer schools, adding to their reputation for professionalism and independence. With the rise of Reza Shah, Iran's fragmented military forces were unified into a national army. By merging the Gendarmerie and the Persian Cossacks, Reza Shah laid the foundation for a centralized and cohesive military force, one that would not only consolidate his rule but also strengthen Iran's sovereignty. The unification of Iran's military marked a turning point in the country's history, signaling the emergence of a new national identity and a stronger, more independent Iran. Reza Shah's reign came to an abrupt end during World War II, primarily due to his refusal to expel German nationals from Iran. At the time, Iran enjoyed strong relations with Nazi Germany. In fact, Iranians were even exempted from the Nuremberg laws as they were officially recognized as pure Aryan race. However, the relationship between Iran and Germany was more complex than it seemed on the surface. During the 1940s, there were only about 1,000 Germans residing in Iran. Most of them were technical advisors contributing to the development of railways and other infrastructure projects across the country. Nevertheless, the Allies, particularly British and the Soviets, were very wary of German activity in Iran. They feared that Nazi Germany was using its presence in the region to gather intelligence on Allied movements. Reza Shah's stance on Nazi Germany was not without its contradictions. For example, he was displeased with the German instigated coup in Iraq in 1941. In response, he denied Germany access to weapons shipments via Iran after the coup. Despite this, he resisted Allied demands to expel the Germans entirely, which led to mounting tensions. There were several reasons behind Reza Shah's reluctance to sever ties with Germany. For one, he feared retaliation after hearing about the high casualty rates inflicted by the Germans on the Soviets during their Eastern Front campaign. Additionally, he suspected that the British and the Soviets were using the German presence as a pretext for an invasion of Iran. Compounding the problem, Reza Shah was surrounded by officials who had become little more than yes men. They avoided delivering bad news, leaving him poorly informed about the political consequences of defying the Allies. In his mind, expelling the Germans would mean capitulating entirely to British and Soviet demands, a step he was unwilling to take. But the Shah's resistance came at a high cost. On August 25, 1941, British and Soviet forces invaded Iran, citing its refusal to expel German nationals as justification. Unable to secure American support, Reza Shah found himself isolated and outmatched. The military conflict ended with Iran's humiliating capitulation, and on September 16, 1941, Reza Shah was forced to abdicate the throne in favor of his son, Muhammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. Reza Shah's downfall marked a turning point in Iran's history, as the country became a key logistical hub for the Allies during the war and ushered in a new era under Muhammad Reza Pahlavi. But his decision to resist Allied pressure, however justified in his mind, ultimately led to his abdication and the end of his rule. By the late 1970s, the Imperial Iranian military had grown into one of the most formidable forces in the Middle East. With over 74,000 active gendarmerie personnel and a massive reserve force of 300,000, Iran had built an impressive military structure. However, despite its size and advanced weaponry, the Iranian military faced deep-rooted issues that would ultimately contribute to the fall of the Pahlavi dynasty. The Imperial Iranian army underwent significant expansion between the 1950s and 70s. Firepower was a major focus, with 30% of its personnel assigned to artillery units. The army also established an aviation command, operating over 600 helicopters for transport, fire support, and command roles. A Sky Cavalry Brigade was formed, inspired by the U.S. air cavalry concept. Iran acquired state-of-the-art equipment, including upgraded American M47 and M60 Patton tanks and 760 British Chieftain main battle tanks, the backbone of its armored divisions. The Air Force saw even more dramatic growth. By 1978, it had become Iran's primary striking force, shifting from air defense to long-range offensive capabilities. Iran acquired F-14 Tomcats equipped with advanced long-range air-to-air missiles, making it the only country outside the U.S. to operate them. The Air Force also expanded its transport fleet, enabling greater mobility across Iran's vast and rugged terrain. The Navy, once the smallest branch, experienced remarkable modernization. Initially relying on aging vessels from the US and UK, Iran developed a modern naval fleet after joining the Baghdad Pact in 1955. British frigates equipped with anti-ship missiles and surface-to-air missiles significantly boosted its capabilities. The Iranian Navy also created the world's largest fleet of military hovercraft for patrolling the Persian Gulf. By 1972, it had expanded its reach into the Indian Ocean, developing amphibious units and a naval aviation organization for anti-submarine warfare. Under Mohammad Reza Shah, Iran sought to develop its own defense industries. Partnering with Britain, Iran built maintenance facilities for Chieftain tanks, while American assistance helped establish helicopter production lines. The country also collaborated with Israel on missile projects, including anti-ship weapons. Iran's growing military-industrial sector produced ammunition, vehicles, and electronics, reducing dependence on foreign suppliers. However, despite its impressive arsenal, the Imperial Iranian military faced serious challenges. In 1977, U.S. congressional report revealed that Iran's armed forces struggled to operate American-made weapons without extensive technical assistance. The military's ability to defend against Iraq or deter Soviet Union remained uncertain without continued U.S. support. A major issue was the Shah's insistence on controlling the officer corps. Competent officers were often sidelined in favor of those loyal to the monarchy, leading to corruption and a lack of leadership initiative. Further complicating matters was a shortage of trained military managers and logistical personnel. The rapid military expansion in the 1970s led to unqualified promotions, weakening overall cohesion. Language barriers and poor technical training made it difficult for conscripts to operate complex equipment effectively. High-tech weapons like F-14 Tomcat suffered from maintenance issues, requiring American assistance to keep them operational. Infrastructure deficiencies, communication gaps, and logistical shortcomings further hampered military efficiency. The root of these problems lay in the Shah's management style. Determined to prevent a military coup, Mohammad Reza Shah personally controlled promotions and assignments. He rewarded senior officers with lucrative salaries and privileges to secure their loyalty. However, this discouraged officers from taking initiative. The military functioned well only when the Shah was directly involved, but his health declined. The armed forces struggled to maintain stability. In the end, the Shah's excessive control over the military and its structural weaknesses played a significant role in the downfall of the Pahlavi dynasty. When faced with widespread domestic unrest in 1979, the military leadership hesitated, uncertain of how to respond. The lack of a clear chain of command and decades of political interference left Iran's once mighty military paralyzed, paving the way for the Islamic Revolution. While Iran's military was once among the most advanced in the region, its internal weaknesses ultimately proved to be its undoing. Okay, so in this segment of the video, we're going to talk about the Iranian military under the current government, which is the Islamic Republic. Let's proceed. In the 1980s, the newly formed Islamic Republic of Iran found itself locked in a brutal war with neighboring Iraq. But beyond the battlefield, Iran was fighting another war, one for military self-sufficiency. With its arsenal depleting and foreign support cut off, Iran had to find innovative ways to maintain and expand its military capabilities. This challenge would lay the foundation for what would later become one of the most significant military-industrial complexes in the region. Following the 1979 revolution, Iran inherited a vast but vulnerable military force. The Shah had spent billions on advanced American and European weaponry, but after the revolution, access to spare parts and maintenance support was cut off. To keep its military machine running, Iran resorted to cannibalizing equipment, stripping parts from old or damaged vehicles to keep others operational. At the same time, engineers worked to reverse engineer these systems, learning how they function and how to replicate them. This era of necessity led Iran to invest heavily in domestic weapons productions. One key milestone was the development of the Sejil, a modified air-to-air Hawk missile that helped Iran advance its missile technology throughout the 1990s. But Iran didn't stop at missiles. By 1989, the country had officially established the Ministry of Defense Armed Forces Logistics, or MODFL, to centralize its military-industrial efforts. MODFL operates under the guidance of Iran's General Staff and Supreme National Security Council, ultimately reporting to the Supreme Leader. Within MODFL, the Defense Industries Organization, boasting over 35,000 employees, became the backbone of Iran's military production. Under the Defense Industries Organization, Iran began producing a wide range of military equipment, including main battle tanks and armored personnel carriers, artillery and multiple rocket launch systems, anti-tank missiles and small arms, short and medium and long-range missiles, fast patrol boats and naval mines, chemical, biological, and nuclear protection gear. Perhaps most significantly, Iran has developed its own UAVs, ballistic missiles, and even satellite technology, joining an exclusive group of nations capable of manufacturing and launching domestically built satellites. Iran's military progress is particularly remarkable given the country's status as one of the most sanctioned nations in the world. Despite decades of embargoes and restrictions, Iran has managed to build a self sufficient defense industry, one that continues to evolve. Whether you support or oppose the Islamic Republic, one thing is certain: Iran's ability to develop advanced military technology under immense international pressure is an undeniable achievement. The roots of Iran's modern ballistic missile program trace back to the brutal Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s. During this conflict, Iran faced devastating missile attacks from Saddam Hussein's forces, while Western sanctions crippled its air force and cut off access to advanced weaponry. With no indigenous missile capabilities or alternative arms suppliers, Iran was left vulnerable. This necessity laid the foundation for the missile program that today faces intense scrutiny from the West and Israel. In the early years of the war, both Iranian troops and civilians were exposed to relentless rockets and missile attacks. To retaliate, Iran managed to secure Soviet Scud missiles through Libya. However, the Soviets soon halted this supply line, leaving Iran in a precarious position. Facing these challenges, Iran turned to North Korea for assistance. During the 1980s, North Korea not only supplied Iran with Scud-B missiles, but also helped build production facilities on Iranian soil. These new missile systems include the Scud-C and the Nodong, renamed Shahab-2 and Shahab-3, formed the backbone of Iran's growing missile arsenal. Since the 1990s, Iran's missile program has been driven by two key factors: strategic partnerships with countries like North Korea, Russia, and China, and substantial investment in developing domestic missile production capabilities. The Shahab missile series, built on North Korean designs, marked Iran's entry into long-range ballistic missile development. The international community's concern over Iran's missile program was evident during the JCPOA negotiations. The United States and its allies strongly pushed for restrictions, fearing the potential threat these missiles posed. Despite the agreement, Iran continued to enhance its missile defenses. In 2016, Russia delivered the advanced S-300 missile defense system to Iran, finally fulfilling a long-delayed contract after the 2015 JCPOA deal. Beyond acquiring foreign technology, Iran has developed its own missile defense systems, such as the Bavar 373 and Khordad 15, according to Brigadier General Farzad Esmaili, commander of the Khatam al-Anbiya Air Defense Base. The Bavar 373 is even superior to the Russian S-300. To safeguard its capabilities, Iran has moved much of its missile production on the ground, making it more challenging for adversaries to target critical facilities. Iran's missile program remains a focal point of international tensions. While critics argue that these developments threaten regional stability, Iran views them as a necessary deterrent against external threats. Regardless of your perspective on the Islamic Republic, one fact remains clear: necessity has driven Iran to become a formidable missile power in the Middle East. When it comes to military power, Iran is no match for the United States in a conventional war. But that's exactly why Iran doesn't fight in traditional force-to-force manner. Instead, it relies on a strategy of asymmetrical warfare, using unconventional tactics and regional alliances to challenge its more powerful adversaries. To Washington, Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism, actively working against American interests and seeking the destruction of Israel. But from Iran's perspective, it is surrounded by enemies with vastly superior firepower and must rely on strategic partnerships to survive. Rather than mobilizing its conventional army for direct combat, Iran has adopted the doctrine of low-intensity conflict, a method of warfare that avoids direct confrontation with the U.S. and its allies. This strategy allows Iran to exert influence, weaken its enemies, and maintain plausible deniability when conflicts arise. So, Iran's regional allies, they consist of Hezbollah, Ansarullah, Palestinian resistance groups, as well as different Iraqi Shia militias. Iran's alliances with various resistance groups in the region play a crucial role in this strategy. These include Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas, militant groups opposing Israeli occupation; Hezbollah, a powerful Lebanese militia and political organization; Shiite militias in Iraq, groups that have fought both U.S. forces and ISIS; Ansarullah, aka Houthis, in Yemen, an armed movement engaged in a long-running conflict against Saudi-led forces. While Iran does not directly command these groups, they cooperate and coordinate operations when their interests align. Through these alliances, Iran has been able to engage in proxy conflicts across the region. In Iraq, Iranian-backed militias have targeted U.S. forces. In Syria, Iran has supported the Assad government along Hezbollah. In Yemen, the Houthis have launched missile strikes on Saudi Arabia and even U.S. naval assets in the Red Sea. And in Gaza and Lebanon, Hamas and Hezbollah have been key players in conflicts with Israel. These proxy wars allow Iran to challenge its adversaries without risking direct military confrontation. In this segment of the video, I would like to talk a little bit more detail about Iran's allies, or what other people would call proxies or whatever. So let's take a look at them. Let's start with probably one of the most famous allies to Iran, which is Hezbollah. Hezbollah, the party of God, to its supporters, it's a legitimate resistance movement fighting against Israeli occupation. To its adversaries, it's an extension of Iranian influence and a designated terrorist organization. But what are Hezbollah's true origins? How did it rise to power, and what role does it play in the modern Middle East? Let's break it down. Hezbollah was officially formed in 1982 in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley during Israel's invasion of Lebanon. Many believe its creation is a direct response to Israeli aggression. However, a deeper look into history reveals that Hezbollah roots trace back to the ideological struggles within Iran's revolutionary movement. In the 1970s, Lebanon was not just a battlefield for Palestinian resistance, but also a critical hub for Iranian opposition groups fighting against the Shah. The weak state structure of Lebanon provided Iranian revolutionaries the perfect environment to train, organize, and expand their influence. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, which had been expelled from Jordan, gave Iranian militants access to military training and weapons. This allowed key Iranian figures, including those who later formed Hezbollah, to build a strong foothold in the region. Although Hezbollah has always maintained a Lebanese identity, its formation was deeply intertwined with Iran's revolutionary factions. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps played a pivotal role in training and financing the group. Figures like Mohammad Saleh Hosseini, a founding member of the IRGC, were instrumental in setting up Hezbollah's structure. Even before the Iranian Revolution in 1979, Iranian activists were in Lebanon operating under fake Palestinian identities, receiving military training and forging alliances with regional groups. One faction, led by figures from the Liberation Movement of Iran, LMI, worked closely with Lebanese Shiite cleric Musa al-Sadr. Another aligned with Ayatollah Khomeini built ties with the PLO and formed the Islamic Republic Party after the Shah's downfall. These internal rivalries shaped Hezbollah's early ideological foundations. Following the 1979 Iranian Revolution, the Khomeinist faction of Iran saw Lebanon as a key battleground to spread its ideology. After Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1982, Hezbollah emerged as a dominant force, resisting Israeli occupation and expanding its political military power. Backed by Tehran, Hezbollah established itself as more than just a militia. It became a political party, a military force, and a powerful regional player. Today, it maintains a sophisticated military arsenal, including advanced missiles and drones, and has played a crucial role in conflicts across the region, including Syria and Iraq. 3 decades after its formation, Hezbollah remains a formidable force in both Lebanon and Iran's regional strategy, while its supporters view it as a defender of Lebanese sovereignty. Its critics sees it as an Iranian proxy destabilizing the Middle East. With tensions rising between Iran and the US and Israel, Hezbollah continues to play a key role in the regional conflicts. The question remains, will Hezbollah's influence grow, or will its deep ties to Tehran lead to a further escalation in the Middle East? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about the Ansarullah, better known as the Houthis. It was once a marginal Zaidi revivalist movement in northern Yemen and has now become a major power, reshaping the country's political and military landscape. But how did this group evolve, and what role does Iran play in its rise? Let's break it down. Unlike Lebanon or Iraq, Yemen was never a primary focus for Iranian foreign policy. Even after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran showed little interest in Yemen, and the reasons were geographical distance, weak political ties, and significant doctrinal differences between Yemeni's Zaidi Shia community and Iran's Twelver Shiaism. However, things began to change in the late 1980s. A Zaidi revivalist movement led by the influential Houthi family started gaining momentum. The movement's ideology gradually aligned with Khomeiniist Islamism, drawing it closer to Iran. Yet, despite ideological similarities, Iran remained cautious. Tehran prioritized economic and political relations with the Yemeni government over supporting the Houthis, at least in the beginning. Throughout the early years of the Houthi insurgency, Iran kept its distance. The movement was seen as a liability rather than an asset. Tehran was focused on strengthening ties with the Yemeni government rather than backing an unpredictable insurgent group. Even during the Arab Spring and Yemen's political transition in 2011, Iran refrained from deep involvement. However, that all changed in 2014 when the Houthis, now calling themselves Ansarullah, took control of Sana'a, Yemen's capital. The situation shifted dramatically. Isolated and facing growing opposition from regional and international actors, the Houthis turned to Iran for support. Meanwhile, Iran's leadership under Ayatollah Khamenei was growing more assertive in its regional strategy. The fall of Sana'a was a turning point. Iran, despite its economic difficulties and military commitments in other regional conflicts, ramped up its support for the Houthis. What had once been a cautious relationship now evolved into a strategic alliance. Iran began providing the Houthis with military training, weapons, technology, and political backing. The partnership was built on three key factors. Strategic alignment. The Houthis became part of Iran's axis of resistance, confronting Saudi Arabia and the West. Shared ideology. While doctrinal differences remained, the Houthis and Iran aligned under Khomeiniist Islamism and resistance to foreign intervention. Regional power struggles. As the Saudi-led coalition launched its military campaign in Yemen, Iran saw an opportunity to counter Saudi influence by reinforcing the support for the Houthis. And the role that Ansarullah plays in the Middle East today. Today, the Houthis are not just a domestic rebel group, they are a major force in Yemen's political and military landscape. With backing from Iran, they have developed advanced missile and drone capabilities, striking targets deep inside Saudi Arabia, and more recently even targeting ships in the Red Sea. The Iran-Ansarullah alliance has reshaped the Middle East's geopolitical balance, turning Yemen into a battleground in the larger struggle between Iran and its regional rivals. While some see the Houthis as an extension of Iranian influence, others argue that they are an independent force fighting for Yemen's sovereignty. One thing is certain, this conflict is far from over. All right. The other allies that Iran have are Iraqi Shia militias. In particular, I'm going to talk about the Badr organization. The Badr organization, once an armed wing of an Iraqi opposition group, now a dominant political and military force. From its early days as a militia fighting alongside Iran in the 1980s to its powerful role in Iraq's security forces today, Badr has shaped Iraq's modern history. But how did this group rise to prominence, and how deep are its ties to Iran? Let's break it down. The Badr organization began as the Badr Corps in the 1980s, serving as the armed wing of the Supreme Council for the Islamic Revolution in Iraq, SCIRI, created with Iranian backing. The group was deeply embedded within Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, IRGC. Under the leadership of Muhammad Baqir al-Hakim, Badr fought against Saddam Hussein's regime, aligning himself with Iran's revolutionary ideology. After the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, the Badr Corps transitioned from an exiled militia into a powerful player inside Iraq. It rebranded as the Badr organization, blending paramilitary activities with political ambitions. Uh, Following the fall of Saddam, Badr leaders entered Iraqi politics. In 2009, the group officially separated from SCIRI and aligned itself with Nouri al-Maliki's State of Law coalition. Hadi al-Amiri, the leader of Badr, quickly rose to power, securing a ministerial post and parliamentary seats. But the real turning point came in 2014 when ISIS swept through Iraq. The Badr organization, alongside groups like Kataib Hezbollah, took charge in the fight against ISIS, playing a key role in forming the Popular Mobilization Forces, PMF, that is to say, Hashat al-Shabi, a state-sanctioned umbrella group of militias. But despite its influence within Iraq, its loyalty remains a point of controversy. The group follows the ideology of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini and recognizes Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei as its highest authority. Critics argue that Badr prioritizes Iranian interests over Iraqi sovereignty, though the organization insists it is an Iraqi nationalist force. The Badr organization is not just a political entity. It remains one of Iraq's most powerful militias. Its military wing, the Martyr Sadr forces, is well trained, heavily armed, and estimated to have between 20,000 to 50,000 fighters. Beyond Iraq, Badr has been deeply involved in the Syrian civil war, fighting alongside the Syrian government and Iran-backed militias. This intervention, according to Badr leadership, aims to protect Shiite religious sites and prevent the collapse of the Syrian state, which eventually happened. But that is we've already gone through a video to why that happened. Badr's influence is also evident in Iraq's security forces, particularly in the Interior Ministry, where it has secured key positions, strengthening its grip on law enforcement and intelligence operations. Despite its prominence, the Badr organization has faced significant criticism. Human rights groups accuse it of sectarian violence and its involvement in controversial operations, such as the 2016 Fallujah offensive, which defied U.S. objections, has raised concerns about militia influence over the Iraqi state. With ongoing tensions between U.S., Iraq, and Iran, Badr's future remains uncertain. Will it continue expanding its political and military influence, or will Iraq push back against Iran-aligned militias? The battle for Iraq's sovereignty is far from over. I'm going to talk about Iran's role in the Palestinian resistance and their alliance with various different Palestinian resistance movements, be they secular or Islamist in nature. But anyway, since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran has positioned itself as a key supporter of the Palestinian cause. While it initially backed the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, Iran's support shifted over time, favoring armed factions committed to resistance against Israel. But how deep are Iran's ties with Palestinian groups like Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad? And how has this relationship evolved over the decades? Let's break it down. After the Islamic Revolution, Iran quickly aligned itself with Palestinian resistance movements. Initially, the new government in Iran supported the PLO, but the support faded when the PLO began opening diplomatic channels with Israel and moving away from armed struggle. Despite its break with the PLO, Iran continued supporting the Marxist-Leninist Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, which remained committed to armed resistance. However, the bulk of Iran's financial and military support shifted in the 1980s toward Islamist factions, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, groups that shared Iran's ideological stance on the conflict. Iran's support for Hamas and PIJ has been both financial and military. It has provided weapons, training, and logistical support. However, the relationship has not always been smooth. In 2012, tensions arose when Hamas sided with Syrian opposition forces instead of Bashar al-Assad's government, an Iranian ally. In response, Iran slashed its funding to Hamas by half and redirected more resources to PIJ, which remained loyal. Another rift appeared in 2014 when PIJ refused to endorse the Houthi movement in Yemen or condemned the Saudi-led coalition, seeking alternative funding. Both Hamas and the PIJ turned to Sunni Arab states such as Qatar and Egypt, but this shift was short-lived. By 2016, Iran reaffirmed its support for PIJ, transferring an estimated $70 million on the condition that PIJ back the Yemeni resistance and send a delegation to meet the Yemeni embassy in Damascus. The relationship between PIJ and Iran has strengthened under the leadership of Ziad al-Nakhala, who appears to have closer ties with Tehran than his predecessor, Ramadan Shallah. The group also saw no viable alternatives for funding elsewhere, making Iran its most reliable backer. Meanwhile, Hamas has been gradually restoring ties with Iran. A key moment came in October 2022 when senior Hamas official Khalil al-Hayya visited Damascus, ending a decade-long rift between Hamas and the Syrian regime. This marked Hamas's return to Iran's sphere of influence after failed attempts to secure long-term support from Sunni governments. While there was speculation that Iran had prior knowledge of the Hamas-led October 7th attacks on Israeli communities, Tehran quickly denied direct involvement. Iranian officials conveyed to Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh that Iran would provide political, not military support. This reflects Iran's strategic interest. It supports Palestinian factions as a means of undermining Israel and the U.S. influence in the region, but it also seeks to avoid full-scale regional war. This cautious approach was also evident after Israel's Operation Cast Lead in 2008 to 2009. Hamas once believed it could align with the Sunni Arab world in the wake of the Arab Spring. The group placed its bets on the rise of Islamist movements, particularly the Ennahda party in Tunisia and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. But after Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi was removed in 2013, Hamas found itself isolated. His successor, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, reinforced the Gaza blockade, cutting Hamas off from vital financial and logistical support. My apologies. Without sufficient backing from the Arab states, Hamas was forced to realign itself with Damascus and Tehran. This shift also highlights the failure of Western engagement with Hamas's more moderate factions. Following Hamas's victory in 2006 Palestinian elections, the international boycott weakened its political wing. Over time, this strengthened the hardliners, who argued that armed struggle rather than diplomacy was the only viable path. The future of Hamas and PIJ depends on whether they can find alternatives to Iranian support. So far, efforts to pull them away from Iran, whether through Arab states or Western diplomacy, have failed. For now, Iran remains the most reliable ally for Palestinian resistance factions, with limited options for funding and military support elsewhere. Hamas and PIJ's reliance on Tehran seems unlikely to change anytime soon. I would like to thank everybody that has watched the video. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and stay tuned for more videos. I'll see you in the next one.